So let's learn more about calligraphy nibs. Basically, there are two types of calligraphy nibs available in the market. The first type, these three are pointed nibs. So you notice that the pointed nibs will have a point at the top. So this is our nickel G nib, and you can see that the point is a triangle shape. And in the pointed nib, there is always a reservoir, which is called the eye or the vent, which is the where we hold the ink here and we allow it to, do the writing. And the second type of nib that we have is a broad nib. So you notice the difference is that the top is not pointed. There's a flat line. Sometimes it's wider, sometimes it's a little bit narrower. It determines how wide the writing will be. Okay, now for this workshop, you definitely want to use the pointer nib because this is suitable for the workshop. Now let me change the camera angle and I want to show you the different types of pointed nibs available. Now for pointer nib, there are different types of pointer nib. There are actually tons and tons of different brands, but to keep it a little bit simple, I will show you mainly three types here. So you can see, first of all, they're made up of different materials. So the first one is the nickel G nib. This is the nib that comes with your starter kit, and it has a silver color. Now this one is a Leonard extra fine nib, and you will notice that it's made up of kind of goldish bronzy color, and the opening, which is the eye or the vent, is slightly different from the nickel G, but this is also the ink reservoir for the nib. Now the last one, they have a nickname for this nib, is called the blue pumpkin because it looks like a pumpkin. I can't even remember the exact name for this because it's very known as a blue pumpkin. And you see the blue pumpkin has a very big vent or the eye here, which is the reservoir. And you can see that it will hold a lot more ink and it's blue in color. Okay, now why there's so many types of nib? Because different types of nib come with different flexibility. So you can see that, for example, when I'm pressing with this nickel G nib, you can see that it belongs to quite a stiff nib and it doesn't really open a lot. You can see I press and the nib opens and it doesn't open really wide. Now let's try the second one, which is the Leonard Extra Fine, which is one of my favorite nib to go for. And you press, you can see the nib opens wider and it actually creates a really fine hairline when you do the upstroke because it has a very sharp tip. Now for the last one, which is the blue pumpkin, you can see that it's very flexible. You can even open it much wider to create a really thick line. So they have different flexibility. So you can kind of summarize it as like, for example, the nickel G belongs to the stiff nib. The Leonard EF principle is the medium flex. And this one, the blue pumpkin, is very flexible. For beginners, it's easier if you stick with a stiffer nib because you can learn to control the pressure gradually. And once you have like a few practice, and you can explore the medium flex nib because especially for those who has a very heavy hand, which means if you press the nib really hard, this is a great way to stop because it kind of forces you to stop pressing too hard because it's semi-flexible. Now for the blue pumpkin nib is one of the most flexible, I would say, one among these three. And it's a little bit harder to control for beginners. So I suggest that you definitely want to gain more experience before you changing up to a more flexible nib. I want to demonstrate to you when we use the nib and the ink how it looks like on actual writing. So I'm going to use the nickel G nib, which is the stiff nib, the stiffest one among all three nibs. Now you can see that when I press, the downstroke is not very thick. It does have a thickness to it, but it's not like very thick because the nib is stiff. The material is quite hard. Now I'm going to change it up to the second nib, which is the semi-flex one, and this is the Leonard Principle Extra Fine, and you can compare the difference. And the downstroke should be thicker because it's more flexible than the Nickel G. Now immediately you can compare the difference. You can see that the Nickel G one, which is the top one, is a little bit thinner than the second one because this nib is more flexible and hence I can create thicker lines for the downstroke. Now I'm going to move on to the third nib, which is the Blue Pumpkin, and it's supposed to be the most flexible nib among all three. You definitely see that the downstroke is thicker than the second one. And if we zoom in to compare, so this is the Blue Pumpkin, Nickel G, and the Leonard Extra Fine. Now, when you look at this, you can see the first one has the least thickness in the downstroke. The second one is a little bit more thicker, but it keeps the very thin hairline. The reason is because the tip of the Leonard Principle Extra Fine, this nib, is very sharp and pointed. And this one, the last one, you will see that there's a lot of thickness for the downstroke, and for the upstroke, which is the hairline, you can see that the hairline is thicker than the second. Now, the reason is because if I'm comparing the Blue Pumpkin with the Leonard Principle Extra Fine, you can see that this one has a sharper tip than the Blue Pumpkin. The Blue Pumpkin tip is a little bit kind of like a, it's not as sharp. It's like a little line here. And that's why the upstroke is a little bit thicker. Now, for beginners, I definitely recommend you to try out with the Nickel G nib because you can learn to control the pressure. And as you progress, I would definitely recommend trying something more semi-flexible like a Leonard Principle Extra Fine nib because you can learn to control the pressure. And then when you get even better, then you can use the more flexible one like a Blue Pumpkin. And I also want to demonstrate using the broad pen. Earlier we talked about mainly the two types of broad nib, and I want you to see that it's very different from a pointed nib. And it's a completely different techniques as well. There you go. You can have a comparison. This is a broad nib, and this was written with a pointer nib, and they look completely different. And I hope that this tutorial give you a better idea of what types of nibs are out there, and I would recommend definitely try out various types of nibs as you progress, and you will figure out which one you like most. And I'll see you in the next video.